This is Paul Nobles from ETPerform.com. I am sitting here with April Blackford. April, if you want to tell everybody hello.
Hello, everybody.
So April is our forum administrator. I think a lot of you probably know that if you've been in the forums, if you signed up. If you don't, or if you haven't been in the forums, then that would certainly be something that you would want to check out because a lot of the questions that you're going to be asking here, you're going to want to follow up with all the coaches in the forums. And so that's one of the best ways for people to get up to speed relatively quickly. Um, so April, I know you're out of town.
No,
Um,
I'm actually, I just got home like an hour ago.
right. And so you were in Maryland, is that correct?
That is correct.
And so why don't you give people an idea on what, you know, things look like when you're traveling?
Well, it was my husband's birthday, and I actually had to make a gourmet dinner for the whole family, which is very large. Um, so I ended up making an herb-crusted rack of lamb and some roasted red potatoes, and I made a pear and roquefort salad, and I made some homemade creme brulee, and it was very delicious. And this type of meal actually coincides with, I was actually going to bring this up, a lot of questions that I've actually been getting, I'd say a lot this past week, and more the week before, but in general, I'm starting to get more and more inquiring as to how am I going to tackle Thanksgiving? How am I going to tackle these big
Actually, we
meals?
have one question right now, and that is the question.
How do you tackle Thanksgiving? And my recommendation has been, obviously, if you can get a workout in that day, great, but not everybody can, especially if you're a mom or you're busy helping prepare, Thanksgiving dinner or you have guests in town, that type of thing. My recommendation has been to, obviously, one day off track is not going to kill you. As long as you're not eating until you're about to explode and making yourself sick, you're not going to gain 5 pounds of fat from doing that. But if you're, super strict in regards to trying to keep damage to a minimal, my suggestion is usually to have your earlier meals in the day basically lighter, maybe have a couple of snacks and then save a big portion of your calories for your bigger meal. And then generally you would want to fill up on, protein, veggies, and still eat the carbs, but, basically fill up on your protein and stuff first and then save room for desserts. And then that way you're not, still majorly hungry and you don't overindulge on all the really, really good stuff. So.
Well, I think one of the strategies that people can look at is, certainly you should try and get in some activity if you can. I mean, that's a real big help. Um, but if you can't, the very next day, I would suggest that you lift, because I know a lot of people tend to go like super cardio on that day. Um, that would not be my suggestion because I feel like you can get a lot more in, and we have to remember that part of what you're trying to accomplish with Eat to Perform, and really kind of the way that you look at lifestyle dieting for the future is you want to have moments of growth combined with moments of eating less. This is naturally going to be one of those moments where you can take an opportunity to eat a little bit more. Then you come back the very next day, lift. Possibly, if you were to ask me what I'm going to do, I would probably end up doing something like a sevens to tens, maybe even down sets to 15s and 20s, you know, um, and usually you should feel like, you should be able to sleep well, right? Because you've got a lot of energy, a lot of snacks, and, go to bed full, and so you sleep well. Wake up the next morning, um, you should be set and ready to go from a muscle standpoint. Throw some caffeine on and get some lifts in. Try and if you can, try and get in an hour to 2 hours worth of lifting. Now, I know that that's not going to be what most people do, which is perfectly fine. Um, but like in my case, as an example, we'll be running a 5K that we run every Thanksgiving on the morning of Thanksgiving. So that's, it's kind of like one of these big, huge things where there's like 50,000 people. So it's not like anybody's running it for time unless you're like the guy in the front of the line and you were expected to win in the first place. So it's probably a 30-minute, kind of deal, at a reasonable pace. Um, and that type of scenario burns what, 400 calories, something like that. Um, Normally, we could go for like a hike as well. It sort of depends on what the weather is here in Minnesota. Um, but I think what April said is really important. I think people get really caught up in, well, I'm going to have these snacks. See, the one thing that I think is a little bit of a problem, though, April, that I would kind of disagree with you a little bit. Um, if you don't eat a meal, you'll end up snacking all day long. And so, you know, I would tend to have a meal earlier. Maybe not like a big, huge meal, um, but I think that if you have a whole bunch of snacks in front of you and you haven't eaten, you're going to be much more tempted by all those snacks. I mean, what do you think about that?
No, I actually recommended meals and not snacks. I'm not a big snacker, but recommended, I guess, kind of my idea of a snack is usually about 500 calories. So, generally like a snack size meal for me would be a 500 calorie meal, so basically a smaller meal, and then, basically going in, eating lighter throughout the day and then saving, a larger portion of your calories for the dinner. I think the big thing is, I think a lot of people get into the disordered eating or the disordered thinking that, okay, I overindulged on Thanksgiving, now I need to overcompensate for the next 2 weeks because I ate like crap for one day. And I think that's the worst thing that you can do, because I think it creates a vicious cycle of, every time you cheat, cheat, or, you overeat or eat for joy, you think you have to take the next week in, reducing your calories and extreme dieting for the next week. And I think that's the worst thing you can do. Exactly like what you said, make the next day. I tell people all the time in the forum who, said, I had a horrible weekend, I had family visit, ate a lot of foods I normally don't eat, what do I do? Should I reduce my calories down? No, pick up just like you were. Use that food to go hit some PRs, and, they're usually posting back in the forum that they killed it in the gym that week with the extra food.
You could eat a little less the next day. I mean, it's not going to kill you to do so. You know what I mean? Like if your macros are normally 23 to 2,500 and you decide that you want to eat around 2,000 because you overate the next day, I don't really have a huge problem with that. But I do hear what you're saying. I think that the good majority of people, I think what ends up happening for a lot of people is, first of all, let's say that they work out 4 days a week, okay? Now, because of Thanksgiving, sometimes people have a thing, like we have a thing on Thanksgiving, and then we have a thing with our family on Saturday. So, and this happens a lot, especially around Christmas and Hanukkah and things of this nature, where you have multiple type of scenarios, right? So they normally work out 4 days a week. Now they're cramming in a whole bunch of workouts. Here's what you do in that scenario. You have some workouts that are hard. You have some workouts that are lifting, and some workouts that are like jogging, And so you can actually get in more workouts, but don't go, balls to the wall every single time, because you'll just end up getting hurt. You won't feel good about it. And frankly, I think that does set up like a disordered way of eating. But like April's saying, I mean, I would say for the next day, you wouldn't necessarily need to worry about hitting your macros. But by Sunday and Monday, things should be back to normal. You shouldn't have to really worry about things that much. Will I be checking the scale every single day? Absolutely. That's just my normal routine. And will the scale be up? Of course, I'll have like salty, carby, sweet potatoes and pumpkin pie and things of this nature. I will say though, like I normally do eat kind of a lot. you know. And so, especially at Thanksgiving, um, you know, my whole family is like, oh my God, Paul eats like crazy, you know. Well, you know, I do a lot more than they do, you know, and so I don't have to worry about it near as much. A couple other strategies, you could fill up on vegetables. You know, that would be another, like if you're gonna go to snacks early, you know, really try to mix in a lot of vegetables, and then it sort of makes the whole um, tortilla chips and cheese dips and things like that a little harder to eat, you know. But if you can sort of fill up on that type of stuff, that's fine. Um, I'm just trying to think of other strategies that people could implement. I mean, it just sort of depends on what feels the most right for you. But in general, I'm not going to have any strategy. You know, my strategy is going to be, you know, I'm going to lift on Wednesday, which will probably be like a leg day type of thing. Um, Actually, you know, now I'm thinking about it because we have a concert to go to on Wednesday night. That might actually be a good day for like upper body stuff, or maybe do a WOD on Wednesday. Thursday morning, I have that 5K, and then on Friday, um, maybe I'll do like I mentioned, where I'll do more of a high rep scheme, leg type stuff. Oh, that's the other thing too. Bang for your buck, legs are going to be great. You know, if you can do, you know, your deadlifts, um, get in lots of reps though. Like don't just go in there and, you know, work up to a 1 rep max, you know, and then leave. You know, definitely get in some reps, get in some accessory work. Um, it's a good day for a finisher. That would be a good day for a finisher. Finisher basically, if you know, if you're familiar with CrossFit, is what a WOD looks like. Um, but yeah, um, that's going to be a good bodybuilding day. I've been kind of struggling actually on what it would look like for me, you know, and so that I think I've kind of solved that a little bit, because normally I would like to have my legs around, you know, Wednesday, because I usually lift heavy on Sunday. But we have two Thanksgivings, so I'll have a chance to lift heavy on Sunday, after my second Thanksgiving. Um,
I'm sure if we go watch some CT Fletcher videos, we can get lots of training ideas for how to burn it off.
yeah, I mean, I think it's fun. It's a really fun week because, you know, first of all, you only have a 3-day work week as a general rule. I'll probably be pretty busy with Eat to Perform just because of the Cyber Monday and Black Friday stuff. But yeah, in general, it's pretty chill, and so there's a lot of time to work out, and it's a fun time. You know, it's a fun time. I mean, I think a lot of people get really weird about it and don't think of the opportunity. And the opportunity is that, um, you know, even if you're with your family, like, you know, here in Minnesota, you could do cross country skiing that weekend. You know, you could definitely go for some hiking. Um, so these are real opportunities, and real opportunities for you to connect with your family, you know, with athletic type stuff that'll, you know, kind of keep everybody moving. You know, one of the things that our family does pretty good is we do end up going for a hike. That's usually what, you know, it's kind of a happy medium for, you know, the people in our family that aren't that active, um, compared to the people that are active, which is pretty much just my wife and myself. Um, but a lot of them tend to go for hikes, and it's fun. You know, it's you know, if you don't do low intensity stuff a lot, I really do highly recommend it, because I think that a lot of people wonder, well, how can I get in more workouts? But if I CrossFit all the time, I kind of get like these overuse issues, and low intensity is a real good answer for that. Um, so we're not getting a lot of questions here, guys, and we have a kind of a big class, so I'm sort of expecting that you guys will, if you have a question, just get it out. We only have 2 questions. We have one that just came in. Adelia is saying, I think it's pronounced Adelia. What would you recommend to help target the fat around the lower ab section on a woman, since that's where we mainly carry our weight due to having kids or a C-section? You can't really spot target fat, and that's probably like bad news, right? What you really need to do, I mean, do you have any idea what your body fat percentage is? Because that would help in terms of, how you would address it. But in general, you're going to address it overall. So 30%, I mean, basically what you're, like for you to see abs, as an example, okay, you're probably looking at, being around 20% to start to see abs, and then probably 17% to truly get there. Now, I'm going to tell you, that sounds awesome, right? And I can give you a strategy that would work really good for you, especially if you're willing to be patient. The problem is that you'll kind of get to, and I say for men, because right now I'm like 15%. So I'll tell you why I'm at 15% and why I'm not at 9% anymore. Okay, and it'll be up to you whether or not that makes sense for you as well. What happens is when you start to change your mindset a little bit, right, and you start to focus on a little body fat, going from 30% to 25% is kind of a big deal. It looks different. It's a really big difference in the mirror, right? So you get really happy with it. But more than that, when you're kind of not focusing on dieting all the time, and then you're allowing yourself to go up in calories and actually increase your work capacity, now all of a sudden it's a little bit more exciting to go to the gym. It's fun to be a part of, and so you wonder sort of why you've been dieting all along, right? And so, the best strategy, from go from 30 to 20. Can you give me an example of what your weight would be, so I could give you like some specific numbers? Okay, so as an example, let's say that in January, you would, in 9 weeks, lose 9 pounds. Okay, so that would be roughly about 6% body fat. Give and take. Ultimately, it would get you really close to the 25% range. I just need to double check my math here. It's hiding my calculator. Shoot. Give me 1 second here. So yeah, that's roughly correct. That 10 weeks, 10 pounds, you would be really close to that 25%. So now at this point, you stop, and you reset for the next 6 months. Okay, could be 3 months, could be 6 months. It sort of depends on where you're at. But in general, I think you'd be much better off if you did 6 months. And in general, that's what I did. In fact, I'm probably going to be going for another 5 pounds to get to that 170-pound range, which will get me into like that 12% range. But in general, 6 months is about where we want people to reset and kind of go from there. Okay, so you get to the 25, you've reset, 6 months, and then you've got another shot. I will say this, the first 10 pounds is a little bit easier than the second 10 pounds, but it also depends on whether or not you were eating to perform, whether you were eating pretty close to your total daily energy expenditure, or you're just coming from a dieting background and you've kind of maybe weren't all in, but then you go, oh gosh, that 10 pounds sounds awesome, right? And so you jump into it, and you have to get too aggressive to get 10 pounds. right? What you ultimately want to do is you want that 10 pounds to be as easy as possible. And so that's why in my scenario, as an example, I just go in 5 pound increments when I've got fat to lose. And, I'm sort of coming down from moving up to the 181 weight class, powerlifting, to get back to the 165, which is probably a better fit for me. But, it's nice to be a little stronger and do some things. I haven't really lost a lot of strength, but right now I can't lift, as an example, what I lifted at 181. There's a little compromise here and there, but some of it's not just because of the weight. Some of it's because, the way that I was training and the way I've kind of, focused on some other things. Is any of this making sense? I mean, is that, do you sort of see how this works, where you sort of take like these gradual approach and then you sort of reset, move back to maintenance, and then you come back down? Is that making sense to you? I mean, do you feel like, as an example, that you're eating an adequate amount of food at this point? I mean, are you tracking your macros? Are you in the forums? These are all things that I think are sort of important to your journey. April, do you have any? She's not responding back yet. Do you have any thoughts on what I'm saying?
I agree about her seeing abs once she works down from 30%. I do want to add in, a lot of females, typically even at lower body fat percentages, they typically have the lower ab fat. It's very common, and a lot of times, once she gets to the area, if it's still there, a lot of times it's associated with postural issues and hip imbalances, because you're basically not working the lower abs because of the hip imbalances. And a lot of times, if you correct that, then you start firing those muscles properly, and it will actually tighten those areas up once you get your body fat percentage down. But a lot of women are notorious for having the abdominal fat in the lower ab region because of that. Basically sitting at a desk, poor posture, your anterior pelvic tilt, that type of thing.
Well, the other thing too, I mean, is that your abs are muscles, right? And so it sort of depends on how long you've developed the muscles. Like, when I was 9%, as an example, I had a very well-defined 4-pack at the top, but the lower part was pretty flat. And the reason being was that my lower abs weren't that developed. Now, here we are 3-4 years later, much stronger, much more developed. If I were to get to 8-9%, certainly those areas, would look very, very different. And so that's a big part of it, and for people in your situation that are trying to get rid of a good amount of body fat, this is another argument for the 6-month approach, where you're spending time mostly building those areas, so when you cut down, they're developed and there's muscle there. If you just, this is one of the problems where you see where people with skinny fat, or like people that overly use cardio, where they diet down and they get to a reasonable body fat percentage. I've seen people 17-15% with no ab definition, and one of the reasons why is because they don't really build that muscle. And so what we're teaching people is a way that allows them to have moments of building, but then also have moments where they're kind of looking for a specific result. I'm hoping that makes sense. She's saying, so I have to recalculate my macros after a few months. I've been doing this now for about 12 days. So yeah, I mean, in terms of 12 days, what most people in your situation are doing is trying to hit their macros, make sure, like as an example for you, it sounds like, you probably do have a little bit of fat to lose. The best thing that I would suggest to you is to kind of dial this in for the next, say month and a half, and then when we do our fat loss challenge in January, then that might be a time, because as long as your macros are pretty good right now and you do have a little bit of fat to lose, you might see a little success. We're not going to like tell you, oh, you have to wait 3 to 6 months before you can even attempt this. I think that you can probably get your protein in order, carbohydrates in order, fats in order, stick in, but we need to get you to where your total daily energy expenditure is. We can't have you still eating, let's say 1,700 calories, and then try and lop off 500 off of that, because it's just not going to work. Your body will just ultimately revolt, if that makes sense. So I'm going to move on. If you have any other follow-up questions, hit us up, or we can obviously talk about this in the forums. But I think at this point, being sort of 12 days in, you're probably still at the point where you're sort of figuring things out, and some of your questions are sort of reflecting that, and that's cool. That's exactly, that's where a lot of people are, So let's see, Noah's saying, for the last 4.5 years, been very low carb, paleo, put my info in the calculator, not been getting enough calories, but I'm having a hard time eating that much. Any suggestions, or just eat less? Program says macros should be calories 3914, protein 215, carbs 482, fat 200, but this much carbs have been very difficult. Well, okay, so there's a couple things here. It sounds like you're a pretty big guy, and so can you? So I think I know your weight. Can you give me your height, Noah? And it also looks like you're probably pretty active. Is that correct?
I'll be curious to see how active, because 200 grams of fat is a lot, which
Yeah,
is
200
which
grams
is
of fat.
probably why it's making it difficult to eat the carbs, which the carbs sound a little high, but it's still trying to
Yeah,
combine 200 grams of fat with that many carbs.
yeah. I mean, I have some ideas on what his macros would be, but the long story short, though, Noah, is that you don't have to jump right into these numbers. In fact, the good majority of the time, we want people to sort of slowly work towards these numbers. And so, do you have any idea how much you were eating previous to this? Because that would be a little bit helpful. Even just a ballpark would be good. Is it 2,000, 2,500, something in that neighborhood? He says he's 6'2", yes, CrossFit lift 5 to 6 days a week. So pretty active. Um, I get here, I'm kind of waiting for his response, but first of all, I'd like to see your fats get lowered. Probably, it sort of depends on where you're at, but I'd like to see them at least at 150. I'd probably like to see them at 125, to be completely honest with you. Do you have any problem with that recommendation, April?
No, how much does he weigh? 215?
Yeah, hold on one second. He's saying previous about 2,700 calories, about 100 carbs, 220 protein, fat not sure, so fat is a lot. you know. Well, like for instance, the 220 and the 100, that's only roughly 1,200. So if you're eating 2,700, you know, that's almost 200 grams of fat. It's about 175. So okay, so let's dig in. Essentially, what you would want to do is you wouldn't want to go from 2,700 calories to 3,900 calories, right? You would want to go from 2,700 calories to probably about 3,000. I'm just going to say 3,000, but realistically, what we usually say is like 200 per week until you're kind of in a ballpark. I think you'll probably be fine right around 3,000. initially, and I think you'll perform better, especially with what I'm going to suggest. And remember, this is for workout days. For the biggest problem you're likely having at this point is you're overusing fat, and you're probably somewhat metabolically inefficient because your body is so reliant on fats and so many fats, right? So if we can get those fats down to somewhat reasonable level, like I said, we can start that off at 150. I really like to see that at 125. In fact, can we work up some macros for him here?
That's actually what I was doing. Do you know how tall he is?
6'2".
I mean,
so
what his age is.
Let's see. He has not given me his age.
I'm just gonna guesstimate 30.
He's saying fats are actually about 150 now. He's age 41. Okay, so here's what I want, April. I want his fats at 125. I want his carbs at 300, and I want his protein at 200. Can you tell me how many macros that is?
Mm-hmm. You said you want his protein at 200, his fats at 125?
Yeah.
At 3,000 calories, he would be
we're making for a really bad webinar here. I just need to know what the calories are on the macros that I just said.
I was actually using a calculator.
Using the Eat to Perform calculator or using a calculator?
I was using the Eat to Perform calculator. How many carbs?
Carbs 300. It's basically 3125.
Yeah, 3125.
Right. So
that is actually what I had ran at the moderately active setting.
Yeah. And the moderately active, the reason why we would set it at moderately active for you is not because you're moderately active, but because we're trying to come up with some kind of number that sort of makes sense. So here's what we do. That's what I would set your macros at. But do I think you're going to hit it? No, I don't think you're going to hit it. I think you're going to struggle to hit it, and I think you're going to really struggle to hit it from a carbohydrate standpoint. The fats, you'll hit that easy because you're overeating fat. But if we can sort of get you to these macros, what I think you're going to see is your output, from an athletic standpoint, is going to go up in a big way. And then also you'll start to see some things kind of come around. I actually think those are probably good macros for you for a while. Even though the calculator for very active is going to say 3,900 and things of that nature, it's going to take your body a while to sort of adjust to that. And so it sort of depends on what your goals are. If your goals are fat loss, we probably want to continuously try and get you inching up a little bit, maybe to that 3,500 range, and then once we go from fat loss, like this 3,125 right now is probably not going to be a big fat loss solution for you because you've been eating so low. But now let's say that we can get you to about 3,500, 3,600. Now we bring you back to 3,125. You're at a 500 calorie deficit. That's basically a pound a week. That's how we do it, right? And so there's really no magic here. It's just we're trying to get people to a point where their work capacity goes up, their energy levels are higher, their non-exercise activity is higher, and ultimately when they do go for a deficit at some point. I mean, do you have any idea on what your body fat percentage is, Noah? He says, I'm actually pretty decent body fat, really looking at improving strength and stamina. Okay, good. This is exactly what you need. I mean, 215 at 6'2", I would think that your body fat would be fine. So 18%. I would still say, like, you would be a lot better off, you know, in that 15 to 12 range. And then we start talking about, well, what's you know, I mean, I have a calculator right in front of me. You know, so 6 times 2.15, you know, it puts you right close to that 200 pound range, to be at 12%. And the thing that's nice about being down 13 pounds is now all of a sudden you're doing more pull-ups, you're running faster, all these things. And so not only should it not affect your strength very much, right, because you shouldn't be losing a lot of muscle if you're doing it gradually, but you're adding a lot of metabolism along the way because, you know, now you're naturally doing more. You're asking your muscle to do more, and that's a big part of what metabolism is. Any thoughts on any of that, April?
No, I agree with everything that you said. I went back and looked at the numbers. He was actually calculating that extremely active,
Yeah.
which, depending upon how long his sessions are, you know, I think eventually if he continued with, you know, 5 to 6 days a week, he could work up to very active. But considering his background, I would suggest starting out with moderately active and then working up from there.
And like, you know, I mean, you know, you're eating 2,700 calories, even at 3,125. That's roughly what I eat as a 5'8", you know, as a 5'8", 175-pound man. You know, so it is possible, depending on what your work capacity is, but you can fully expect that your work capacity will go up as you start to become a little bit more reliant on carbohydrates around your workouts, and you start to people don't realize how energy dense fat is, and so a lot of times they move to fats, which is fine. It's a great fuel when you're at rest, but the problem is that, you know, if you're just trading, you know, your old glucose habits for new fat habits, you know, and you're drinking bulletproof coffee all the time, and you're adding oils to everything, and, you know, you can get to 200 and 250 real quickly, and that's usually not really helpful for athletes at this point. So I'm going to move on. Know if you have any follow-up, you know, hit us, but we've got roughly 20 minutes left, and so I want to be able to get everybody's questions in. Let's see. Tina said, I received my first email from April today, and it included avoid fats in your post-workout meal. If I'm having 25 grams of protein in my post-workout meal, would that likely be a protein drink with a very low fat content? So, April, why don't you go ahead and answer that question since you're the one that sent the email?
If you do have a protein drink, that would be good. If not, then I would suggest leaner sources of protein in your post-workout meal. If you're having your post-workout meal generally within,
can you give her some examples?
Some examples. It's depending. I have to look and see when she trains. If it's for breakfast, generally egg whites, chicken sausage, something like that. If you're using your breakfast as your post-workout meal, for the most part, if you train early in the morning and you are a breakfast person and like your traditional breakfast, then I usually recommend a protein shake immediately after with some carbs, and then you can wait an hour, hour and a half or so, and then have your traditional breakfast if that's what you like.
I mean, I guess I wasn't necessarily thinking it was breakfast, and so so I would be thinking more in lines of chicken or tuna or something of that nature. But for the most part, people use protein, you know, like whey protein in that scenario. Let's see.
Or even fish or seafood works well if it's dinner
yes,
time.
you said yes, it would be breakfast, 7:30 a.m. workout. So yeah, the suggestions that April made there, it is kind of hard to find chicken sausage. Most chicken sausage is actually dark meat, and so it's it's not super lean, but it's
Actually,
obviously
the Applegate chicken sausage, it's the Applegate chicken sausage. That's actually pretty low in fat. That's the only one that I have found that I've seen that doesn't carry the higher fats in it. And I think it's
yeah.
like 3 links per serving, something like that.
I think we use the 8Ls, and it's usually pretty higher in fat, but that's what makes it taste so damn good.
I started to say
Um,
that's why it's tasty.
yeah, have you had like the mango and jalapeno?
Yes,
Oh
yes,
my
it's
God,
really
that's so good. You know, the problem with sausage in general, just so you guys know, like, you always hear like, oh man, yogurt is really. We were having a discussion on Facebook about this. Yogurt is so high in depending on yogurt, it's like 10 grams. Eggs, 6 grams. Chicken sausage, 6 grams. So it's sort of hard to get in. Your protein needs when you're having these sources. So you have to have some that tend to be meats, or like for April and myself, we tend to add like if I probably have oatmeal now probably 3-4 times a week, and then I can get in roughly 35 grams of protein in that oatmeal. you know so these are sort of opportunities that people don't think of. Fage, as an example, is a yogurt that has a lot of protein. You can then also put protein in it, so I put like um, either 1 scoop or 2 scoops of PB Smash, which is like a peanut butter flavored. So like 7 ounces gives me, I think, 20 grams. 2 things of PB Smash puts me right at 45 grams, and that's just for like a 7 ounce um, thing of yogurt. So these are some of the strategies that you use to get your protein numbers in line. And so those are some things to think about. Now, could you do it with meats? Could you do it with? Absolutely, you can. But it's if it takes a lot of planning doing it that way, it really takes a lot of planning when you're using whole foods. Um, so let's see. I think that answered your question, Tina. So if you have any follow-ups, just hit us up and we'll run through it. Teddy's asking, so you're saying it's easier to lose if you've been going all in with ETP. I don't know. All in sort of suggests that maybe you were irresponsible. I mean, I every now and again, I'll have people say to me, well, I'm doing Eat to Perform, and I said, well, how much protein are you eating a day? I don't really know. So, like, what are your carb sources? I pretty much just eat all the carbs. It's like, that's not eating to perform. That's just eating, you know. And so, does that mean like like we were talking earlier, Thanksgiving, you're fine. Don't trip out. It's not that big of a deal. Try to make the best decisions throughout the day. For the most part, it's not going to be a big deal for you. But the one thing that I just hate to see, because I don't live like this myself, and obviously I follow Eat to Perform as the person that pretty much designed this with me, April, James, Mike, all these people. We eat in a pretty regimented way. I mean, we don't eat, just recklessly because that's going to somehow gain some huge advantage. Now, let's say that you were a 25-year-old athlete and you could really, like, if Garrett Fisher comes to mind, Garrett Fisher doesn't eat very well, nothing against him. Rich Froning doesn't eat very well. Nothing against those guys. Those are monster athletes. Everything is fuel to them. They need to pack in as much as they can. God bless them. That's awesome. We aren't them, right? We don't have the ability to take in 6,000 calories on a daily basis. And even if we did, it would make us lethargic. It wouldn't necessarily, we don't have their work capacities. And so eating in an irresponsible manner would not be Eat to Perform. But certainly anytime you can get your calorie point higher, get your work capacity higher, now all of a sudden when you try to cut down 5 pounds, it's really easy to do. And what a lot of people don't understand is that as you get leaner and leaner and leaner, it gets harder and harder and harder. So when I say earlier to Adelia, losing 10 pounds, she's probably thinking to herself, well, that would be very easy to do. I've done that before, no big deal. Well, that's fine, but once you start to get to 25, now all of a sudden you need those 6 months off because the next 5 are harder, and the next 5 after that are really harder. So, for someone to go from 30% to say 17%, really, if you were asking me the truth, 2 years, But if I said to you, you're 30% right now, you can be 17%, I can guarantee it to you, right? You go, sign me up, because I've been trying to get to 17% my whole life and I'm stuck at 30%. Well, the reason being is you've been doing it the hard way, and so it gets harder. See, the problem with trying to go from 30 to 17 is you sort of hit that wall at 25, and what we do is when you hit that wall at 25%, we have you go back to maintenance. Most people at that point still start slamming into the wall to the point where cravings become a big issue, where they find themselves kind of making some bad decisions a lot more often, and then they go from 25 back to 30 and they wonder how it happened so quickly, and so I would say that if you asked me what is the big secret to Eat to Perform, I would say the big secret to Eat to Perform is that the time when you're not dieting, you have a very well-defined plan, right? And so, and you can call it a diet break, you could call it reverse dieting for some people, but in general, most people don't have a good plan for the times that they aren't dieting, and the reality is you should be not dieting most of the time, and that's what I think makes this work so well for a lot of people. Teddy did also have a follow-up. I think he was asking in relationship to some other stuff, but he's saying when people go for a deficit, is it usually rest days that we look to create the deficit, or do we sometimes subtract from workout day macros? It really depends, okay? We were just talking to someone who works out 5 to 6 days a week. In that scenario, it's going to have to be an average if we're looking for fat loss. He wasn't necessarily looking for fat loss, and it's possible, given that he was coming from a low-carb background, that he might actually be able to go from 18 to 12. That's the other thing, too. I really should have mentioned that, Noah, is that you might be able to stay at 215 or maybe even closer, maybe closer to 10, because all that fat and fiber basically blunts your insulin response and kind of holds back your muscle building potential or even muscle maintenance potential. So you get kind of a little atrophy over time. Nothing huge. It's not going to be like, super threatening unless it goes really, really long periods of time, to the point where, it kind of ends up being a net negative. But now all of a sudden you kind of switch it around. You use that carbohydrate for that muscle protein turnover, and you can go from 18 to 12 potentially without losing any weight at all, right? And so that's sort of what we would probably be working with in his scenario, Teddy. Okay, so now let me give you, I would say if you're working out 5 days a week and you're resting 2 days a week, you're not going to lose a whole lot of fat, okay? That's going to be more of a maintenance strategy. Some of the things that you could look at, you could try to have I do this fairly often because I like to keep my workout days, in that 5 and 6 range, just because I enjoy it. It's something that gets me out of the house. So I will try and see results when I first started cutting back down from 181, it was pretty easy to kind of maintain that, have a lower average, and be fine. Um, because actually, when at 181, I was ultimately got up to like 188, something like that. Um, but then from 181.75, I actually had to reduce my workouts to see some results there. And so that's a strategy that you can look at. Normally, if you can go down to say 4 days a week, your averages can be a little bit better. You can get a little bit more aggressive on those days. Another thing too is to add a little bit of low intensity. That can also help you with some calories. Let's see, saying I remember that on your Instagram post. Yeah, for people who don't know, I'm still not completely convinced that I am going to cut in January, but I think I am, and I'm probably going to cut. Teddy actually was following me on Instagram at that point. Now, here's an interesting point I haven't really talked a whole lot about, um, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that in the time since I was doing the Instagram cut, where I got down to 175, I'm 177 right now, sometimes up to 178. Pretty safe to assume that I've probably added about 2 pounds of muscle in that time period, especially with the type of training that I've been doing, right? And so, so rather than go from, let's say, 170 and using, or 177 and saying, I've got to get to 170, I just go, well, essentially, if you've gained 2 pounds of muscle, then I only need to get back to 172. So 172 will probably be my goal. But if I start at 178, it will be 173. And once again, this doesn't need to be perfect for me. When I body fat test at the end, I'll see sort of where I'm at, and then if if I'm going to go lower, I suspect I'll be close to around 12% at that point. You know, when you've done this, and 12% with a good amount of muscle looks really good. You know what I mean? So like, will I be incentivized to go to 9% as an example? I don't know. Sometimes I see people and I get really motivated to do that, but other times it's just like, what's the big deal? I'm 46 years old. I enjoy going to the gym. I don't want to be dieting all the time. That's not fun. It takes away from the fun of what I like to do. So, I'm sorry, April.
That's okay. I was gonna make the suggestion that maybe we should cut together in January and we'll both keep it posted on Instagram as like a
Yeah,
group.
Eat to Perform April. That would be awesome.
That would be my first official cut in what, over 2 years, like 2 years and 2 months, something like that.
Yeah, both of my cuts, where I ultimately went down 15 pounds, or 13 pounds or whatever it was, um, were pretty easy. Like the first 10 was really super easy. I barely did anything different. Um, let's see. So Teddy's saying, "Yep, makes sense. Not planning on cutting yet myself either. Was just curious about what the most common procedure might be." I think the most common procedure, is like I'm explaining it. Um, I think for a lot of people, they'd probably be better off kind of in that 8-pound range, 8 to 10 pounds, sort of depending on, where you're at. Like for instance, when we were talking earlier, 30%, cutting down, 10 pounds from 170 to 160. That's probably pretty easy if you got real serious about it. But that next 5%, I'm just going to tell you, that's the equivalent of a man at 15% trying to go to 10, and that gets hard, and you do start to see some atrophy. You don't hold on to muscle as much, and so it gets a little bit to be a little difficult. Um, Steve is asking if someone has a torn diastasis from surgery, is it possible to recover from that and build those muscles up again? I have to be honest with you, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Isn't that the muscle in the abs? I think it is.
I do. Hopefully she'll be back here soon, but her internet froze up. April?
No, I'm back.
Okay.
Sorry.
So where is it?
So is it the muscle in the abs, the abdominal region?
I have no idea. He's saying
Um,
yes, separation of right and left abs. I
I
got to
think.
be honest. I really don't want to speak on it, and actually, I don't want April to speak on it.
Yeah, I
We're not
started to
done.
say, well, I wasn't going to speak, professionally, but I have seen people who actually have the surgery to repair it, and then it builds back up. But generally, if you have the injury, normally the repair is going to have to take place before you can get the look that you desire back.
I mean, as someone who went through pretty major surgery in the last 5 to 6 years, the one thing that you find is that all the advice that you get tends to be the wrong ones. Um, they're so scared of you hurting yourself that they don't allow you to actually progress. you know and so, like, speaking for myself, I'm not going to speak for you because your injury is different than my injury. Mine was an ankle injury. I tore my ankle off my leg. But the best thing that ever happened to me was getting back and doing what I could, and once I was able to do that, naturally my body just sort of gravitated towards um, things that were more challenging and interesting. But in that time period, I would stay in touch with your doctor. Um, I have a pretty close relationship with my doctor along the way, and he was pretty supportive, even though he was kind of scared to death of me because I had never lifted weights in my life, and then here I am, trying to deadlift 450 pounds, within 2 years of major surgery. So, those are things to keep in mind. But in general, most people get too cautious and then don't allow for proper healing, and I think that that's a little bit of a mistake as well. I hope that kind of answers your question. I think the goal, though, is to try and do what you can as quickly as possible. So Mark is saying, I'm a 50-year-old CrossFitter on a pretty aggressive 5-day-a-week, body fat minus 10, 6'1", 187, trying to build muscle and strength primarily. What would be a good number of fat grams a day to calculate my macros? 51, 187 in terms of gaining strength, I would probably put you at about 100. Is there any way you could use the calculator, April, and see what his macros would look like?
I can.
His
Yeah,
body's,
I was
his
actually.
body's. Go ahead.
His body fat is sub 10, correct?
He's saying body fat is 10.
Oh, okay.
Here's the mistake that people make, Mark. What happens? First of all, you can stay really lean eating fat. Okay. I'll be the first to tell you that. I know some really lean people, but they can't do all that much. Like April and I know a guy who's like 5% and shredded, and whether his athletic career is going to end up being amazing and things like that. The fact of the matter is the guy looks like a lot of people would like to look. And so that's a plus. But if you're looking to get better as an athlete, carbs need to be a big part of the equation. And so what happens is people let their fats creep up to that 125, 150, 175 range because it's real comfortable. It's easy to get there, with fats. Instead, though, you'd be much better off having a moderate fat intake with, roughly 185, 187 protein. You could actually have your protein 160 to 165, but I would argue that for someone very lean like you would definitely want to keep that protein up to 185, because the two things that are going to when you're lean like you are, your body views your muscle as an energy source, and so having enough carbohydrate for protein turnover, but also enough protein to kind of excuse me, I don't have any water and my throat's getting a little dry. But having enough protein to kind of repair that is going to make a difference. So, April, what are you coming up with?
If we set it for very active, it comes out to a little over 3,200 calories, which would bring his carbs up to 392. Moderately active with around 4 days a week of training, that put him around almost 2,900 with 310. I personally would suggest somewhere in between. I think 392 is probably a lot of carbs for him. I would say.
It just depends.
Yeah, I agree.
It really. I mean, the one thing that I would suggest is for someone looking to get stronger, have carbs intra-workout. He's saying it makes sense. I think I haven't had enough carbs, and I use a lot of coconut oil and oatmeal and whatnot. As someone who's kind of made the coconut oil mistake, I can tell you that coconut oil does feel good. Like, you do like it. It gives you a lot of energy, but it's not the same sort of energy that ultimately will fuel better and more capable muscle the way that carbohydrates will. And so don't go, zero carb. Like April's saying, somewhere between 310 and 392 is probably where you want to be. But I think you'd be shocked if you actually gave 392 a shot, especially at your body fat percentage, on how it would make you feel. The other thing that, I always like to say to people, especially if they're open to the idea, man, I can't use caffeine on a lot of my workouts. The one day that I can is Sunday, so that's the day I go heaviest. It makes a huge difference. So if you can get caffeine in, definitely do so. It's a big boost to what you do. Was that helpful, Mark? I mean, you sound like a great athlete. Do you have any specific goals in mind? Are you trying to, compete as a Masters competitor or something of that nature? Powerlifting meets are kind of fun too. Trying to make the gains. There you go. Well, we're actually starting a forum for competitors. So definitely, get active in that and stay in touch with all of us. You can certainly friend me on Facebook. He's saying he was 17th in Central East in 2014. I'm telling you, Mark, the difference between 17th and having a real shot is carbohydrates. As an example, most people know that, I work with Danny Horan. We've actually taken Danny from 153 to 145, and her carbohydrates, that was the one thing we would not compromise. So set it at 390 for carbs. No, what we're saying is set it somewhere between 310 and 390, but you know what? Take a shot at 390. The one thing that I would really suggest for you, doesn't have to be Vitargo. I like Vitargo. I think Vitargo is a great supplement for people in your situation. I can tell you, every games athlete, I was at Vitargo as a drinkable carbohydrate. When I was at the CrossFit Games, I was with the guys at the Vitargo booth, and it was shocking how many CrossFit Games athletes were coming to get Vitargo. We certainly recommend it for every single person that we work with. And in terms of intra-competition, there's just really nothing better than that. You can have 2 scoops of Vitargo, that's 70 grams right there. That's something that you can have around a workout, and it makes a big difference. So how would I use that around workouts before and after doing 2-to-1 carb to protein? You could do 2-to-1 carb to protein. I actually would say for you and your intake, probably 4-to-1 carb to protein. The protein doesn't become as big of an issue for you, right? If you're doing like these, I can tell you, I personally do 3-to-1, 4-to-1 all the time. The carbs are way more important than the protein in that scenario, assuming, of course, that you get your protein in throughout the day. The timing of protein is nowhere near as important as making sure that you have available energy for your body, right? And so that would be my suggestion. Certainly 3-to-1 is probably makes more sense, but like I said, you can play with that a little bit. I like the flavored stuff. People are asking as I'm talking. Tropical is really good. I mean, they're all really good. I mean, orange, I love the orange.
Actually, I thought grape was actually my favorite.
Yeah, I like them all. They're not overbearing. They're not like super sweet. But they're just they're good. So I was told that post-workout I should put sugar into my protein shake to help with glycogen and glucose replacement. Is there any truth to that? Some people will argue that I think what they mean is quick sugars, right? What we're talking about with Vitargo is similar to that, except it's starch. So it's going to load better. It's ultimately going to be more beneficial if you just put table sugar as an example. Sure, it will get your insulin going. That will help in the uptake, but it's not really usable fuel the way that a starch would be. Let's see. Any problem with banana and dextrose in post-workout shakes? Nope, not at all. In fact, dextrose is pretty similar to Vitargo. Only problem I have with dextrose is can be a little too sweet. Bananas, you want to go ripe bananas. Gotcha, we'll try. I feel like I should have more energy with how hard I'm working out. Absolutely. I'm telling you, if you take these carbs to the next level, it might just be the answer to you having a better shot. So let's see. We've got a number of people that haven't been addressed here. Justin's saying, is there a macro calculator available online like what April is doing? Absolutely. It's at etperform.com. And so the other thing that you can do is you can go to the forums and then just ask someone to set your macros, and essentially they do what April's doing right now. So I hope that is helpful. If you have any other follow-ups there, Justin, but yeah, you can just go there. The one thing that I would suggest, though, is watch the videos and the tutorials and make sure you're not setting up your fats too high and you're keeping protein low. That's just not going to be favorable for the muscle protein turnover like we've been talking about. Penelope saying, hey, great webinar. I'm Penny, 335, 5'8", 225, about 30% body fat, work out daily. Intake, gluten-free, low sodium, low sugar, eat about 250 carbs a day, 80 to 90 protein, 40 to 50 grams of fat, that's pretty low. 80 to 90 grams of protein, that's pretty low. At 1,500 to 1,700 calories a day, I jog every other day. Yoga stretch, live 6 days a week, and I can't get down. I'm stuck. The goal is fat loss down to 165. Okay, first of all, you're 225 right now. Let's get 165 out of the picture. 165, is ultimately where you may end up, but what we need to do is get you from 225 to 215. That's the first step, right? The problem you're having is that one, you're not eating enough protein, like not even close, and you're certainly not eating enough fat, and ultimately you're stalled. What you have to do is you have to go the other way. You're never going to get to where you want to go. And we've been talking about this. I don't know how much you've heard or what you know we've been able to describe to you. Okay, but if we look at April, do you want to run her macros real quick?
Yeah, give me her stats again. My internet was running out was kind of going in and out at the very beginning.
35 years old. She's 5'8", 225 pounds, 30% body fat. She works out a lot. She eats very little. Penelope, I don't know if you're still here because she asked it at 7:41. That was about half. She said, yes, I am. Do you sleep very well? Because a lot of people with the stats that you're talking about usually don't sleep very well. I'd be interested to hear that. 6 to 7 hours at most. Okay, so no is the answer. I know this is going to scare the dickens out of you, but I'm telling you, we have so many examples of people that have been in your situation, and it sounds like, I'm assuming you didn't start off at 225 pounds. How much weight have you lost up to this point? Right. So sure, you're down roughly 15 pounds. One of the things that, and how long have you been dieting? For this round, you've probably been dieting much longer than that. Your problem is you got just too aggressive too fast. Yeah. So she's been dieting for about a year. You're not gonna like this, but truthfully, you gotta stop. You have to reset. It's probably minimum 3 months where you're going to have to get back to maintenance calories. April, do you have her macros at this point?
Even at moderately active, I set her around 175 for protein. 175 for protein. If she went up to 100 grams of fat, that would put her at 298 in carbs, but it's a little over 2,700 in calories, which shows kind of how much she's under eating.
Yeah, right, and that's the stress, and that's why you're sleeping bad and things of this nature. Now, are we saying that you need to go to that number right now, today, tomorrow? No, we're not. So don't do that, okay? But we do need you to be active in the forums, and we need you to talk to April and Suzanne and Catherine and all these other people, because it's going to be a process for you, and it's probably going to be hard for you because it's sort of scary because you always want the scale. I can tell you, as someone that lost roughly 75 pounds, like I talked a little bit earlier about when I went up weight to go to powerlifting, that was like scary as shit for me, man. Because I had lost so much weight. But the reason why I did it was because I was tired of being dieting guy, and I wanted to perform better. And I did. I moved my deadlift up, roughly 100 pounds. For you to get to where you want to go, first of all, you're not only are you under eating, but all the things that you're doing are basically, not building, right? And so, as someone who is probably a pretty strong person, I'm not seeing a lot of weightlifting there. That's something you might want to consider. Okay, so you say your deadlift's at 200. So you do lift weights. You just didn't mention that. If you're at 1,500 to 1,700 right now, we need to kind of take you from 1,700 to 1,900 to 2,100. Um, I probably don't agree that 125, is fats that you sort of need. I don't think you'll ever need to be at 125 fats. Um, you know, the reason why April put it that way, though, is
No,
just,
no. I actually put her at 100 for fats, not 125.
oh, I could swear you said 125.
No, 100, and it was 298 in carbs. Yeah, no,
Okay.
100 grams fat.
And then that's 2,700 calories, you said?
2750.
Okay. So we need to gradually move you into, these types of scenarios. And then I'd like to see you lift more. What the biggest mistake people make, and the biggest mistake you're going to make, is they focus so much on subtraction that they actually miss out on one of the major things related to fat loss, and that is maintaining the muscle and potentially even building a little bit of muscle through that process, and then increasing your metabolism as a result. When you look at body fat, basically what it is um, is I'm sorry. Your body fat is two things. It's muscle and it's fat, and you're just focused on the fat. And so we need to get you focused a little bit on the muscle part, at least for the next 2-3 months as we start to stabilize you at a higher number. Okay. The reason why you're stalled is because you went too low, too fast, and my guess is that every now and again you make some bad decisions because you're starving, you're craving food, and ultimately you probably feel guilty about it because you want to get to 165. You need to get 165 out of your head. I'm going to tell you, I've been where you're at, okay? And the only way for you to get to where you want to go, I did what you wanted to do in 1 year because I went 5 pounds at a time. I never looked at it at 225 to 165. Ultimately, exactly what you wanted to do is exactly what I did, right? But I did it 5 pounds at a time. And when you do it 5 pounds at a time, you're much more patient. And if I said to you, eventually we could get you to 165, right? I'm not even sure that you should be at 165. The one thing that I hate about 5'8", 5'10", 6 feet tall women, we hear these stories from women all the time, and they just get like really super bad advice related to their body structure, the way that they're built, and ultimately it sort of messes with them. You might be very comfortable at weights very different than 165. And so if you can just say, well, 225, you might have to hang at 225. Like I said, you've gotten too aggressive too quickly. So what we're going to need to do is kind of maybe keep you right around that 225, 2 months, 3 months. I know you're going to be anxious to sort of jump into this, but if we can get you up to like a higher number, 25 to 2,700, now all of a sudden we can come down 500 calories, lose a pound a week, 10 weeks, and then sort of reset and reevaluate. But you don't want to get to a point where you're 2,700, 2,200, 1,700, 1,200, 800, right? You're finding all these ways to be less and less and less and less. You sound like an active person. You sound like exercise is a priority for you. I don't know how long exercise has been a priority for you. It needs to become a bigger priority for you. It needs to be like the reason, not the fat loss. Get the fat loss out of your head. The fat loss is going to happen. The fat loss, if you make it a commitment, it will happen. But you have to make sure that you're enjoying the process. Because right now, if I was doing what you're doing, I would fucking hate my life, right? And I apologize if that offends you. See, she's saying I'd be fine at 180. I don't care what you'd be fine at it at this point. We're not talking about 180. We're talking about 225 to 220, and then 220 to 215. That's how you do it. You eat an elephant and you bite it off in chunks. You know, what you're saying would be so discouraging. You know, it really, I really need. No, I'm not saying that you would hate your life. I'm saying that you would hate the process of the dieting and not seeing results. I mean, you can't tell me that, like, right now you love the process you're on, you know, and you're basically just doing what a lot of people do. You know, they sort of default to logic and ultimately kind of get confused in the process. And um, so I hope that's helpful. Definitely, you know, we'd like you to stay in touch with us in the forums, but we need to gradually move you from that 1,500 to 1,700. You know, no person your size exercising the way that you are should be eating so little. You know, and we can get you to where you want to go, but first we gotta reprogram you from a lot of the bad ideas that you've taken up, and then move you into where, you know, moving and enjoying, you know, the process, you know, and if we can get you to a point where you can consistently move back. See, what you don't know, that's probably a little scary, but I can tell you right now, this is something that's going to be enlightening for you, and it will change your life, is that you get to go up. You don't have to just go down. And going up is scary first time, but then once you realize you can pull that off and you can go up and down and over and out, it's really empowering, and it will change you. Trust me, I know. I'm 6, 7 years into this thing, and so, and I never realized that you could go both up and down. And I guess, you know, we all start these journeys, and then, you know, we are really long here, you guys, so I'm gonna just try and get to everybody's questions here. Let's see. Reese is saying, just showing the, I chose telephone, it tells me I can listen. Do I need to do something specific? Where can I purchase Vitargo? When would you take this and it's substitute for any meals? You can get it at GNC. The flavored stuff is usually available online. We actually do have it in the Eat to Perform store. I could maybe post a link. We posted a link the other day.
I'll get her the link. She had actually texted me the question as well. She was having technical difficulties and couldn't actually ask a question.
Yeah. If you could get her the link to the store, we're actually almost out of it.
Hey, can you make sure you save me a giant tub, because I need one of the big ones.
Yeah, for sure. But if you do want to pick it up and you're okay with unflavored and you like just want to use it with your protein or something like that, you can just go to GNC and get it. They have it. Let's see. Corey. Hi, I'm new, wanting to know where to start. Been reading a lot of the articles posted on Facebook. Still not sure where to start. I used to CrossFit, although since the birth of my twins, I haven't gotten back into it. I'm currently lifting with playing soccer. The suggestion that I would do is just go to the forums and go to the TDE section, the Total Daily Energy Expenditure section, and then a coach will set your numbers for you. And that's the best place to start. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Jennifer. Sorry, Jennifer. Confused about where protein should be set for fat loss. Lower than 30% body fat in female. Book says to set it at 0.75, but then someone else recommends setting based off of LBM. Where should this be set for someone just starting out wanting to lose fat? LBM is really for obese people. That's the quickest way to say it. If you're 400 pounds, we don't want you eating 400 pounds of protein. That's not going to be super helpful. You know, so, you know, if you're 50% body fat, at that point you would have 200, you know, protein. For someone in your situation, 0.75 is fine. You're 165. truthfully, there's no negative to protein. So if you can get to 165, that'd be fine. I would say somewhere in that 140 to 165 would be my goal for you each day, and I think that would be favorable as it relates to your body fat percentage. Right now, you're at 30.5. I wouldn't say that protein is the biggest thing, though. A big part of this is people want to eat protein, they want to eat lower carbs. You're saying fat loss, okay? I don't know where your calories are set, so it's hard for me to speak on that. But truthfully, a lot of people in your situation are under eating, so sort of getting those carbohydrates and those fat numbers in to a reasonable level makes some sense. Corey saying, I'm not sure how to get to the forums. Corey, what I would do is go to etperform.com, and then it'll say Science Lab Forums in the navigation, and then just sign up for the forums, and as long as you're a member, which I would believe that you are since you got this email, then April will approve you, and you'll be good to go. Leo and Roxy Garcia have been ETP for 1 week now. Is there a certain period of time you wait to adjust my macros to hit certain goals? Certainly longer than 1 week. I don't do CrossFit. Looking more towards gaining strength and having better physique. I've noticed most people are adjusting macros to hit PRs and such. What if I'm just doing ETP to help me be healthy and have a better fit physique? Well, I can tell you, April and I rarely are cutting or bulking. In general, we just kind of do what you say. Where we're eating just to be healthy, enjoy our workouts, and enjoy our life. And then occasionally, we look at what would make my life more interesting. Maybe for me, that might be a powerlifting competition. So then I go, well, okay, if I'm going to be in a powerlifting competition, right now I'm 175. Do I want to compete at 165 or 181? A lot of people go, I want to compete at 165. Well, problem with 165 is, you're going to have to cut weight, and you're trying to get stronger for a powerlifting competition. I mean, unless you're going for like American record or something like that, you'd probably be better off competing at 181. Because even at 181, you could be 175 and still compete at 181, right? Because it's sort of hard to explain to people, but it's based on to compete at 165, you have to be lower. To compete at 181, you have to be lower. So I don't know if that makes sense. I'm not even sure if Leo and Roxy are still around, but certainly the good majority of people, I think what happens for a lot of people that start off with the Eat to Perform is they go, I need fat loss, I need fat loss, I need fat loss. And we sort of get them to the point of kind of looking at fat loss a little differently, being a little bit more patient, sort of like what we talked about with Penelope, kind of getting her numbers up to a reasonable level. Penelope, I'm just telling you right now, I can fix that sleep thing. We need to get those numbers in line. We'll get that sleep. April needs to become your best friend. If April becomes your best friend, you'll get to where you want to go. It's just going to take you some time and patience, right? So I'm not sure if Leo and Roxy are still around. I'm not even sure why there's two names there. But certainly the good majority of us find over time that, yeah, the fat loss thing is cool, and it's nice to know that you can go that route if you wanted to. The good majority of us, though, are working out, enjoying ourselves, and eating adequate amounts of food to do it. And, really eating with a purpose. When we talk about 350 grams of carbohydrate, like in the case of, I think it was Mark that was trying to get to the CrossFit Games. In the case of Mark, he's not going to be eating pastries. He's going to be eating starches. He's going to be eating rice. He's going to be eating, Vitargo, drinking things like that. So those are things that need to be a real big part of the equation. I'm not sure if the recording is ending right now or not, but we are supposed to end at the very latest right now, and we pretty much addressed everybody's questions, and we sort of went a little long tonight. Part of the reason why is because we started getting the questions in a little late, but everybody got fired up, had a great session. Sorry I stuttered a little bit. Man, I'm telling you, after it gets to be about an hour of this, it starts to get hard to really address these questions in a way that doesn't allow me to stutter. So I appreciate everybody being here. Overall, I thought it was a good session. Any thoughts, April, before we leave?
I think it was a good. I think it was a good, variety of different topics, which a lot of our
Yeah,
members. I'll post the link in the forum, and to everybody that's watching and everybody that posted questions. If you're not in the forum, you need to get in the forum because you get all these little specific questions answered, within minutes upon posting, But I
by
think
20
do what?
by 20 people. I mean,
Exactly.
there's a lot more people able to address your questions.
Exactly. So.
All right, well, I appreciate everybody being here, and we'll see you guys in the forums. All right, let me close this down.